Hey guys, welcome back. So today I'm talking about, is it love or is it trauma? And the reality is this is a question that I wish I had known to ask when I was younger, or I wish I had known the answer to when I was younger. Because if you're brought up in dynamics that aren't the healthiest in childhood, one of two things can happen. You can either be attracted to somebody that is unhealthy, right, and that is toxic, or, and this is something that we don't talk about enough, or you can create the dynamics as well if you meet somebody healthy. Okay? It can be one or the other. I've seen them both take place. So, with that in mind, let's jump in and really distinguish what love looks like and what trauma looks like. For those that are new to my channel, my name is Michele and I'm a life and relationship coach. I'm also the founder of the Thriver School of Transformation, which is an interactive monthly membership where we meet live weekly and we talk about all the things that I talk about on my channel, and we find ways to put tools and mindsets into practice in our daily life. So if that's something that could be beneficial to you, make sure you check out the links in the description below. Okay, so let's talk about love and trauma and why it's important to distinguish between the two. All right, so basically, something that we have to understand is that we can become attracted to and or addicted to certain emotional states, and it could be described as an emotional addiction. So for example, if our body has been used to certain emotional states from childhood, right? So let's say, for example, we'll talk about what trauma looks like in childhood and what those emotional states look like that we wind up feeling attracted to in our adult life. So if in our childhood we felt a lot of emotional rejection, fear, we felt unloved, unworthy, not accepted. If the relationship in our childhood between us and our caregiver was very push and pull, like you were always striving to gain the approval of the parent or caregiver, and they were always refusing to give it to you. And then maybe you would start living your own life and start doing things on your own, and then your parent was seeking you and your time, and then it was this constant push and pull, right? If those dynamics were common in your childhood, then your body actually gets used to the chemical signature of those emotional states. Remember that when our body is addicted to something, it doesn't mean that something is good for us. It just means that the body has learned what those emotional states feel like, and when it's around something or someone that wakes up those emotional states, it feels good to the body because it's familiar. Not necessarily because it's good for you, but because it's familiar. It's not very different from physical addictions, okay? So for example, when I was 16, I smoked, right? And when I was about 18 years old, I wanted to quit, okay? So quitting after 2 years was really hard because my body had grown used to it, right? It had become a habit. And when I quit, I literally could not be around anybody that smoked because what would happen is it would wake up my addiction. At that time, it was so strong that I felt like I would cave in and I would give in, right? So I had to spend time outside of anything that would wake up that addiction. Now, after a long period of time, what will happen is the longer I went without smoking, the neural pathways to wanting to smoke atrophy. They get weak, they disappear, and I made new neural connections, right? So now I could be around somebody that smokes, I could walk by somebody that smokes, I could see a pack of cigarettes there, and I have zero desire to smoke because it's no longer familiar in my body. So it's the same thing with our emotional states. Now what happens is if you grew up with those emotional states that I described, where maybe love is paired with very high highs and very low lows, with a very push and pull dynamic, with having to earn love, right? With giving and hoping that the person sees you, with feeling all of those chemical states. And suddenly you're in a relationship with somebody, or you're in relationship after relationship where those same dynamics are being created, it's because you're actually in trauma. You're not in love. You're not bonding with that person in a healthy way. The situation is waking up the emotional states that are familiar in your body. And because they haven't been healed or resolved, when you're around somebody that wakes up those same emotional states, you might think that you found your soulmate because it's like out of this world. It feels so amazing. It's almost like a high. But the reality is that your body is feeling so good because it's recognizing something familiar that it's been used to feeling for a long time. And if we find ourselves in these kinds of relationships, if you were to pause and ask yourself, are the dynamics that keep coming up in my relationships, do they remind me of the dynamics from my childhood? If they do, even if your adult self is healed and is happy with your caregivers, even if your adult self feels like it let the past go, right? And you feel like you're moving on, your patterns are showing you that on a subconscious level, your subconscious is still in those same patterns. And until you change your subconscious beliefs around relationships and you change the patterns that are keeping those beliefs alive, you will either not notice people that are healthy, or you will feel like they're boring and you won't want to be around them. Or if you wind up in a relationship with somebody healthy, you might actually kind of wake up in yourself those dynamics that were your caregiver, or the ways your caregiver treated you, and you might start treating somebody else that way in your body's attempt to get those same chemical responses. So it's important to break that pattern, okay? Now, what does love look like? It's very, very opposite, right? Instead of that overnight, like I met my soulmate kind of chemical high that you get with somebody that you may be in trauma with, it's more starting off slow and growing, okay? Also, when you're in love with somebody, you are yourself. You're not thinking about, I have to be something for them to like me. I have to gain and earn their love. You're just being your authentic self. You feel safe being vulnerable. You feel accepted and respected, and you give that as well. There are boundaries when you're in love, and I think one of the most interesting things that help you to notice if you are in trauma or in love with somebody is the depth of the relationship. Okay, when I learned this, I thought, how could I not have seen this? Like, what happened? But anyway, when you think about the depth of the relationship, so for example, when you are in trauma with somebody, the highs are so high, the lows are so low, but if you really think about those highs that you think are so great, there's still not any emotional depth. It's just for a little while you feel a tiny bit of acceptance, or you feel a tiny bit of the person not running from you, and it feels good. But if you were to really peel it back, when I look at the relationships that I was in where there was that push and pull, there was no depth to the relationship. There was no friendship. The only emotions were either way over here or way over here, and there was nothing in the middle. Whereas when you're in love with somebody, you have your highs and lows, right? No relationship is perfect, but there's depth. There's so many different emotions that you experience when you're in love with somebody. It's not all love or war. So again, quick summary, if you are in trauma with somebody, you're going to feel a very strong push and pull dynamic between each other. You're going to, one person is always chasing, the other person is always fleeing. You're going to feel like you're on an emotional roller coaster. There's no boundaries. There's a huge lack of emotional depth, and you never feel safe being yourself. Okay, so evaluate your relationships, right? If you've been repeating the same dynamics, has it really been love, or have you been in trauma? And if you feel like it has been trauma, that's nothing to be ashamed of, because the reality is that As a child, you didn't get to choose your upbringing. You didn't get to choose the emotional health of your parents, right? And it's unfortunate that you had to have that trauma as a child. The great thing now is that you're now an adult and you can take responsibility for your growth and for the relationships that you choose to be in. And if you're struggling with this, always remember, like I said in the beginning, I have the Thriver School of Transformation, which is designed to give weekly support to people that are working through these side effects of childhood emotional trauma.